So the idea of having seamless AI integration that is going to generate information that's going to help make decisions, I think is going to be a game changer for manufacturing.
Where is the world going in the next 5 years? And we have to have a systematic way of really reskilling the American workforce.
There's something magical about being in a factory floor and watching something being made, and nothing can replace that. We make things for other people, and we make everything. We'll make everything from consumer products like vacuum cleaners to hair straighteners to very complicated things like autonomous car compute, to healthcare devices to data center products.
There's a technology revolution also happening. The growth is driving it, but the technology change is also driving why this makes sense at this point in time.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm David J. Lynch, Global Economics Correspondent here at the Post. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Revathi Advaithi, the CEO of Flex, for a conversation about American manufacturing. I want to start at the beginning of your career, just very briefly. I remember from our earlier conversation several years ago that you began your career on the factory floor of an Eaton Corporation plant out in Shawnee, Oklahoma, of all places. I think you were in a supervisor position at the time. If you took a snapshot of the work, of your daily work at that time, and then went back to that plant today to see what your modern day successor, what their day looks like, how different would the experience be, do you think?
Yeah, first is thanks for having me, David. And you and I first spoke in 2020, I think, just at the height of the COVID pandemic, and lots of different things since then. I would say I remember my life then. I would drive into shift change in the morning, leave my home at 4:30, get there by 5:30 for shift change at 6. And I had this notebook and pencil that I would kind of take the shift change notes from the previous supervisor. And then I'd translate all of that into this big whiteboard, to make sure that everybody who came into the shift knew their task, because I had like 50 machinists, big machine shop that we had there making hydraulic pumps and motors for the kind of construction industry. And so it was all very manual. Every day we would manually exchange notes. We would manually give directions. I would take notes from from the shop floor guys and then translate it back to the next shift. Nothing got stored. We didn't know the issues that happened in the last shift the next day. And that was life then. That was in 1995. And you think about it now, right? And I'm sure our factories and those factories run similarly. A shop floor supervisor, before they leave home, probably knows how their day looks like. What equipment is down, how many people are showing up, what setup changes, utilization is going to run at 30% or 80%, make all the tweaks probably in the bed in their house before they even come in, and probably driving an EV car or something like that. I was driving a Honda Civic. And then the beautiful part, I'm sure, that's happening today in every factory is that all this information is getting stored. And next day, when you have a machine down, you have all this intelligence that's making those decisions for you. You don't have to think about, what happened 5 days ago and what did I do when that big, machining equipment was down. So I'm sure it's a whole different world. At least I hope it's a whole different world.
If it's not, Eaton's got a problem.
That's right. If it's not, we all have a problem. So, as long as kind of the factory human side of the world is still the same, I think we've come a long ways.
And, I think of Flex as sort of one of the most interesting companies that the average person probably has never heard of.
Correct.
You guys are behind the scenes. You're behind the scenes in a lot of markets, $28 billion in revenue, 150,000 employees spread all over the world. What do you want the company to be known for? How should people out in the audience think of Flex? What's the core competency?
Yeah, so I came into Flex 7 years ago, and my whole career was with industrial companies like Eaton or Honeywell, working in aerospace, working in oil and gas, working in hydraulics, and then most of my career in the energy space. So when I came into Flex, I didn't know what it was all about till I found out more about it. It is one of the world's largest contract manufacturing companies, which means that customers give us their product and we make it for them. We could be making a very complex healthcare medical care device that some of you may be using, like continuous glucose monitors and things like that. We could be making very complex automotive equipment, or we could be making a vacuum cleaner that you use in your house. And then today we make a lot of power infrastructure, compute cooling products for data centers. So we're the name behind the name. All the name brands you use, I always say that you probably are using something that we have manufactured sometime during the course of your day. Yep. So for us, the complexity of we need to be able to make something that's going to go into the human body and the responsibility that comes with it. And we need to make that vacuum cleaner that you don't want it to break down and be kind of service-free for the life. So that complexity of manufacturing is significant and is always misunderstood that, oh, it just shows up in your doorstep somehow. And that's what I want you to know about Flex is that these 150,000 people across the world are showing up every day making extremely complex things that are hard to make that all of you get to use. And we have to do that with high quality and make sure that whether it's a pandemic or a supply chain crisis, our customers are still happy getting our products every single day. Yep. And I didn't appreciate that 7 years ago, David, when I first came into Flex, right? And today, 7 years later, I see the magnitude of what we're doing, particularly when this conversation of building manufacturing locally and close to the consumer and reshoring conversations are going across the world. I see the significance of what we do and what we provide every single day.
Yeah, we're going to get to reshoring in a bit. One thing I think, or one initiative that you undertook at Flex was to steer out of some of those consumer markets. Why did you do that, and what have you prioritized instead?
Yeah, so, having worked for 30 years, from Shawnee, Oklahoma to Hutchinson, Kansas, I have seen everything come in and out of kind of where manufacturing gets done, where industrial companies put their base in the last 30 years, right? And so I've seen the whole variety of things that has happened. I moved to China and lived and worked in China for Eaton, running their electrical business, saw the magnitude of what's capable there. And when I came to Flex and I looked at the consumer side of our business, it was very clear that we would never be able to compete in that industry. One is being a Western company that's publicly traded, right? We have to deliver shareholder value, which means you have to keep improving your financials every year. And so competing with Asian manufacturers where they have a low cost of capital and an unfair advantage was never going to work for us. And then the product life cycles were so short that every day you were making something and then tweaking it the next day. And there wasn't enough money to be made in that value chain end to end, right? The end customer or the end manufacturer may be making a lot of money, but we weren't. And so it very quickly came to a conclusion that when you're at 2-3% operating margin, you couldn't live in that product life cycle. It wasn't rocket science to figure that out. Yeah. Every job I've taken, the first thing I do is look at portfolio and mix. And I said, we just needed to get out of that. We're never going to compete and be successful in it. So really de-emphasize the entire consumer side of the business. We still do a lot of consumer stuff, but we only do high-end, difficult to do, complex products where people are going to pay a lot of money for it and our customers get to sell it at high value. Then we do it. Otherwise, we exited all of those and really left that to a ton of Asian manufacturers, knowing that we could never compete in that space, and refocus the company on high value, difficult to do things, charge a premium for it, vertically integrated, and that kind of philosophy of bringing manufacturing technology to the forefront is kind of what drove our portfolio strategy.
Yeah. And let's talk about AI for a minute. It's already making itself felt on the factory floor. Where are you seeing the biggest effects from AI, and what sort of investments are you making to further develop that capability?
Yeah, so let's start with first manufacturing and industrial companies for the last kind of 30 years. My hypothesis, and the data suggests this very clearly, is that outside of labor arbitrage, we truly haven't seen manufacturing productivity move, right? Look at the last 2 decades, look at manufacturing productivity. Take out labor arbitrage, really hasn't moved the needle. And there are reasons why that is the case, right? One of the big reasons is factories inherently are really built with many software systems that are put together that don't talk to each other very well. And it is a worse problem for kind of mid-sized manufacturing and small-sized manufacturing. An average factory probably has, a good factory will have 50 software systems. Most factories will have like 100 to 200 software systems. Wow. So we have been, fallen for all these enterprise software systems that are come our way, put them all together. None of them talk to each other, don't work seamlessly, and we make suboptimal decisions all the time in every factory floor. And that world is going to change. And I am super excited about that world changing because I've been pissed off about it for 20 years now. So why that world's going to change is because if you can get a data layer, forget your 50, 100, 200 software systems. If you can get a data layer, right, that is clean, that is agile, then you can start making a lot of decisions really, really fast. And I'll give you some real examples, to think about this. Average utilization in a factory, doesn't matter what people tell you, they'll tell you it's 80, 90%. Those are all lies because they make it sound 80, 90% by saying, oh, I took out equipment downtime or I took out X, Y, and Z. Usually 50% is a big number. It's like a good number. Usually it's running.
Utilization.
Yeah, for factory utilization. Wow. Usually 30% is where they run. But the reason why is because customers' mix changes, then setup changes, or factory, worker didn't show up, or machine downtime. The variables are many, many variables, and you put all those together, and your equipment is sitting idle most of the time, right? So here comes AI, right? Here comes AI. You can have planning systems, right, that are taking all these complex variables and are making smart decisions that if it moves your utilization up 10% or 20%, that is able to say, well, I'm going to predict that because Thanksgiving is coming along, I'm going to have 5% more absenteeism than I typically had. And your best use of equipment will be to run this set of products for this customer that can move your utilization up 10 points, right? That kind of intelligence is game changing. Average factories don't do that. So I'm super excited about AI in the factory floor and what that's going to do for productivity and efficiency, because it's going to be a game changer. We're not going to be falling prey to all these complex software systems anymore. No. And I know everyone's focused on automation and humanoids and all those cool stuff. All that's happening, right? Automation's happening and hardware automation is happening. All that is game changing and it'll be great. But I'm super excited about AI's impact on software automation and what that does to the future of industrial companies. Very important for America, by the way, because we don't have the advantage of a low cost of capital.
Right. Yeah.
So we can take advantage of this, game changing for
Interesting.
us.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard the productivity issue discussed in quite that way before.
Come to one of our factories, David. I'll show you how they work.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yes, please show up.
The NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, the other day described AI as a, quote, once-in-a-generation opportunity to reindustrialize America and restore the nation's capacity to build. Where do you see the best, most achievable case for the use of AI to promote or be used for the reshoring, to boost domestic production? How is AI going to play into that?
First is I'll say I agree 100% with what Jensen's saying, and I have real life examples for this already happening, right? I've spent 30 years of my career watching factories move out of America to all parts of the world. And today I'm seeing a true rebuilding of factories in America. And it is being done in a smart way and in a thoughtful way because you're bringing back manufacturing in hard to do complex integration, complex assembly and test. So for example, if you have to put together like a compute integration rack, right, for what goes into data centers, you can't put all that together and ship it from across the ocean. It's very complex and there's lots of changes that happen all the time. So it's best done close to home. So setting up factories that put together those integration, all the way from cutting the metal, for putting all that together, testing it, that takes a ton of power, and then being able to pop it into a data center where it's ready to go, is something that's happening today in America. And that wasn't happening a few years ago because one was the volume wasn't significant enough, the complexity wasn't so big. So the things you're seeing coming back home are the difficult to do assembly and test integration, the very kind of high power tests that are happening. Those are the kinds of jobs that you're really seeing coming back into the US. Just a month ago, we signed another new lease in, close to Austin and Georgetown for a factory that's going to be up and running in 12 months. We hope to have 50 megawatt of power there. And that factory is already sold out. That is the kinds of jobs that are coming in because they will do very complicated things.
And what will you be producing there?
Just what I talked about, compute integration, things that go into a data center is what will be produced there. So, but it requires skilled technicians who know how to test these kinds of equipment, who know how to build that kind of equipment. It'll require machining equipment to cut all the metal and put it together. So it'll be very kind of high-skilled jobs that'll be required to run that factory. Those are the kinds of reindustrialization we're seeing today in America, which is exciting for a person like me who's seen it kind of go out and then now come back all over again.
Right. And you mentioned labor arbitrage earlier, and obviously the wage differential between, say, a lower cost venue like China and the US has narrowed over the last couple of decades, but it still remains the case that Chinese workers are fundamentally less well paid than an American worker. So what kinds of work should we not be trying to bring back? There's still stuff that's going to be made in China or Malaysia or Mexico, other places. That's not basic manufacturing. That's not going to be our area of focus, I wouldn't think. So what kinds of, is there a danger that we're going to try and overdo the reshoring and end up with stuff that we're just not cost competitive in?
Well, I hope there is not a danger that we will overdo the reshoring because we can't. And the reason we can't is, first, there's not enough people in the country to do things that are not absolutely of high value, right? So my favorite product that I always talk about is this vision and need and want to build phones in America. And, if you think about that, a basic electronic board that goes into a lot of this equipment, like a printed circuit board, is not something that you probably want to do in America, right? One is it has environmental issues. A lot of people can do it. Why would you try to do that unless you can bring high quality automation to do it in a more efficient way, more environmentally friendly way? Then yes, that's something that we should think about doing, but that's not where it is today. So we have so many kind of good quality things to do that we should be able to pick and choose and get the best of what we want to do. So when I think about PCBs, capacitors, resistors, all of those easy to do things, we don't need that kind of labor to do that work. So my thing is, I think most industrial companies are smart. They know what kind of things to focus on. I don't think there's politics aside, politicians may talk about bringing those kinds of jobs home, but I don't think any CEO will look at it and say, this is what I want to use my very high quality labor in America to be doing.
Yeah. Now, last month, Flex announced its plan to create a spin-off company called SpinCo.
Yes.
I hope the marketing department didn't get a bonus for that name.
No, I hope not. In fact, my kids thought that was the name of the company, unfortunately, like most others.
But anyway, you're going to be at the helm of that new effort. What's the thinking behind it? Behind the spinoff, why not keep that work in-house, and why did you decide to go with that instead of staying with Flex?
Yeah, so I told you Flex is one of the world's largest contract manufacturing companies. And when I came into Flex 7 years ago, the thing I was looking to do was, build on certain technologies that I thought could drive higher value for Flex. So we exited a lot of portfolio. We spun off another company called Nextracker. That's a $17 billion valuation today. So we've done a lot of portfolio work. But within that portfolio work, we started building technology that we thought would be important for the future. My history is in the energy space. I've spent a lot of my time in that. So one of the things we started looking at was building power for powering the chips, because we were already putting all the compute trays together, and we thought compute is going to get power hungry. This is well before the ChatGPT moment. And so that's what we started building, is really powering that. And then at that time, I thought, well, you're going to put all this power into this rack, and then how are you going to distribute all that power all the way towards the data center and the grid? So I started buying all these power companies to put together a compute cooling power portfolio. Mm-hmm. And then the ChatGPT moment happens. Everybody wakes up. They understand that now data centers are a thing. Compute's getting hot, needs to be cooled and powered. And so suddenly we have this business that is taking a lot of capital, technology. It's a product company within a contract manufacturing company. And capital allocation priorities change, right? So it was important for us to say, let's have two management teams focus on these two companies. SpinCo is going to grow at 70% this year, 80% next year. So it has different priorities, different capital allocation look. And then Flex has a lot of work to do, because we want to continue to build the same thing we did in areas like healthcare and industrial products. Mm-hmm. So here you have two companies with a fantastic opportunity to go do big things, that the timing made a lot of sense. And I am excited about the energy revolution that's going to happen in this country, and that's my history and heritage, so I've chosen to go run that.
Makes sense. The hyperscalers are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars of CapEx into the data center space that will use all that power that you're talking about. We've seen some recent reports about companies, users of AI, looking up and saying, holy cow, I'm spending a lot of money on this, and I'm not sure I see much ROI. Let me throttle back a little bit. Do you have any concerns about this area being a bubble?
Not at all. And not at all. And the reason I'll tell you why is, the data is staggering, right? I mean, think about this. I think it's like in 2030, data center is going to take like 975 terawatt hours of power and globally. And half of that is going to be, in the US, right? So the amount of electricity it's going to consume is just staggering, right? And just 5 years ago, David, we used to make what I call these compute racks, right? Which is the stuff that goes into data centers. And that used to be like 10 kilowatt, right? Today, like it's soon going into 600 kilowatt. Now, what does that mean to the layperson? A 600 kilowatt rack, that's like just, think about something that goes in a cabinet in your house, could power 1,000 homes, right? And like thousands of those are going into a data center. And when I think about what's happening with the CapEx investment there, I differentiate between training and inference. A lot of the deployment today is going into training, right? And which is required. You have to build the LLM models, you have to build the kind of intelligence into it. But think about as inference takes off, right? Those agentic AIs we're deploying and all of that in factories, in corporate America, in homes, all of those will be working at scale and will be in an agile way making decisions. So if you think about the compute story, it feels like it's barely started. Think about when inference takes off and how much that is going to be taking. So yes, hyperscalers are putting $700, billion of investment this year and probably have to repeat that a few years. But the data is staggering in terms of what is going to be required. And then the electricity story is a whole different one, right? So because that has just started. We don't know how to make the 600 kilowatt rack and deal with the thermodynamics of the heat and the cooling and all that happens. So now we have to fix the grid. We have to fix all the power stuff. And that journey is going to take another decade plus of investment to make it real. Yeah. So we have a long runway in this. I know it feels like we're investing a lot of money, but America is ahead because of our innovation, and we love our innovation because we're so good at it. Today, we're behind in infrastructure. And if we can't get ahead on that infrastructure, we're going to fall behind. We're going to lose all that innovation that we just put so much effort into. So I feel this capital deployment has legs, and at least I'm going to see it in the near future, is my view at least.
Okay, fair enough. We've only got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you a key question about who's going to do all this work, right? We were talking earlier about 400,000 openings in the manufacturing sector, and that's been the case for some time. We've cut off immigration. We've got very little growth in the labor force, and we've got 400,000 vacancies, and we want more manufacturing to come into the country. How do you square that circle?
I would say that, there is some data that's promising here, right? So what I'm hearing and seeing is a lot of Gen Zers, I think that's the Gen, right? I forget all these Gens, by the way, want to go into kind of skilled jobs like apprentice jobs, skilled worker jobs, right? And so if we can have public-private partnership to really train and retrain America. Go into the middle of America, Shawnee, Oklahoma, Hutchinson, Kansas, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the areas I lived in. There's a lot of people who want to get retrained to do these jobs. So we have to have an apprenticeship program that really is deployed in a systematic way at a statewide level to really rebuild America for those jobs. Otherwise, we'll continue to have 300,000 jobs open. And then being an immigrant sitting here in this chair, I will say that having an immigration policy that is cohesive, consistent, and long-term will also help that story.
So we're down to less than a minute. I want to end on a little bit of a personal note. If I recall correctly, you grew up in India as one of 5 sisters.
Yes.
And I think it was your dad's example that led you into the career that you chose.
That's right.
What would you say today to young women out there looking at manufacturing or the power space or AI and considering these opportunities, how would you encourage them to take the plunge?
I would tell young women that, a lot of young women think engineering is a daunting space to be in. And, I'm very public about this. I tell everybody I'm a bad engineer. The only reason I went to engineering school was I knew it would give me a paycheck and would give me a job. And look where I am today, right? So if I can do it, a lot of young women can get into engineering and STEM and those kinds of roles, because if you have strategic thinking, if you have common sense, if you have the ability to put a vision together, you can go places. And that's all I brought to the table. So I want every young woman to aspire to say that I can do this. And then I do this while being a full-time mom with a husband who's got a full-time career, right? So I do think one can get it all. But I want women to aspire to know that, hey, she was not a great student. She was able to do this and she got here. So, there's no reason all of you can't think about that.
So we're ending on the theme of there is hope for the C student.
That's correct.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. That's me.
Fair enough. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Revathi Advaithi, thanks again for joining us. And please stick around. There's more to come.